Welcome to Global Conversations about Boundaries. I'm Sarri Gilman, and I am a therapist in the Pacific Northwest in the United States. And I write and teach on the subject of boundaries and overwhelm recovery. And I have a book, Transform Your Boundaries, and another book, Naming and Taming Overwhelm. And I am here today with Shannon Sedlaceck.
Yeah.
I am so excited to have you as a guest today, Shannon.
Thank you, Sarri. I'm excited too.
Yeah, you have such an incredible story to share. And I know that people who listen in are going to hear a lot about how you have navigated with your compass and your yeses and your nos, and how you kind of found yourself discovering for you what really worked in pivoting in your life. And now you teach that to others. And so that is such a great topic for people that work on boundaries and focus on that in their lives. We do find ourselves pivoting, and really what happens when you listen deeply to your compass. So you have become, I would say, a master of the pivot. And explain to our listeners how you define pivoting, what that means.
Well, really, I think it's you come to a point in your life and you recognize that what you're doing, whether it's relationship or for me, certainly I've done some big work pivots, but I've done a big relationship pivot too. Recognize something's not working and you say, hey, I need to make some pretty serious change here, or even a small change. But my pivots tend to be rather big.
Yes. Can you share with everyone the story about kind of your career pivot, going from being a lawyer to a firefighter? That's an enormous pivot.
It is. There's a through line, but I found myself as a young litigation attorney struggling a bit, and it was such a challenge to actually go through law school, and I got a great job and I start practicing, and I really was overwhelmed with the feeling of, is this it? Like, I'm going to be doing this for 40 more years? And I could just feel my soul going, no, don't do this. Don't do this.
Wow. So your compass was signaling. And
Huge.
like, it must have been so hard to kind of deal with that signal. I mean, you were committed, you had gone down this track and paid a lot of money, I assume, to go to law school and invest all this time and energy to become a lawyer. What were the signals that your compass was giving you that was saying, no, 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 no? What were you hearing inside?
So I really felt like what I was doing was ineffective. I felt deep in my soul that I wanted to help people. It's the whole reason I became a lawyer. I wanted to solve problems and I wanted to help people. And I think there's absolutely, the law can do that for people. I found myself really struggling to seeing the benefit of the legal process. And back when I was practicing, it was in the infancy of, alternate dispute resolution. Everything just went to trial. So there really there was arbitration, but it was very much in its infancy. And in my mind, I just kept thinking, wow, and in my attempts to help my clients, it just seems like it's creating a bigger pain and a bigger problem for them. I just didn't feel inside good about what I was doing in the world.
So you're hearing this bubbling up from inside, no, this isn't it. This is not helping. I need to change. How do you end up picking firefighting?
Well, I think it's fair to say that I resisted that inner compass for a number of years, about 7, actually.
Okay, now that's true to many listeners who are listening. We do know that we can hear something inside and be arguing with it and be telling ourselves, no way am I going to do this. That's crazy. filling our compass with doubt. But then you get to a
Absolutely.
point where you stop doubting yourself, and that's where what happened to you. And how did you get to firefighting?
So I really realized that it had come to the point where I had this amazing job. I had a fantastic boss. I was working at this international law firm. I had a corner office. I had everything on the outside looked fantastic, and I was miserable on the
Mm-hmm.
inside.
That's the
So
signal.
that's the signal. It's
Yeah, that's the
like
compass
this
signal
is
right
not
there.
working. Like everything
Mhm.
looks amazing. I should be. This is everything that I thought I wanted to achieve, and yet I'm completely and totally miserable.
See,
And I
that's it.
recognized,
When we make plans in the future with our boundaries and our compass, the truth is that, you know, you get there, but you don't really know what something's going to feel like
mhm,
until you're actually in the experience. And then you're in the experience and you realize that that is not what your soul is seeking. That is not fulfilling. And it also may be causing all kinds of other sort of symptoms. Like, you
yes,
know, people get depressed and they think, well,
absolutely.
really what I should do is just take medication because I'm supposed to be happy here. But
Mhm.
if but there may be something beyond the medication, which is why so many doctors insist if they give you medication for depression, they also want you to do therapy to kind of dig down and find out what else is causing this. And so
Right.
you obviously dug down and you figured that out and you did start listening and stop doubting yourself. But out of all the things in the universe to choose from at that moment, how do you get to firefighting?
Complete serendipity, right? So I had actually, what forced me to actually listen was an accident. I had actually fell off a ladder that
Mm-hmm.
I dreamed about doing. And it was so realistic and so weird.
So you fell off a ladder in reality.
In reality, I dreamed it, and the morning that I woke up from the dream, it was incredibly vivid, scared the bejesus out of me. And later that day, I fell 16 feet off of a ladder. And that injury, I didn't break anything, but I spent several days in the hospital. But that
Okay.
injury literally did what I was refusing to do. It forced me to be still. It forced me to listen because I couldn't move. I mean,
I know this story.
those little angels basically just threw me off the ladder and said, "You will listen.
For
You need
so
to pivot."
many people, Shannon, for so many people, they finally tune into their compass and have to hear it, usually under the terms of an injury or an illness, because that is when we get still enough, long enough to like it just keeps coming up for us. Okay, so you're in this, you're injured, you're
So
flat on your
I'm
back,
injured, right? That
and
gave
you
me
get
time and clarity. I went
and
back
it
to
said
work.
firefighter?
No,
No.
I went back to work and I realized I'm changing my entire life. I have no idea what I want to do. I'm going to, as my therapist at the time said, wipe the coffee table clean. Broke up with the man I was living to, started dating my secretary, who was a woman, pretty big pivot, and said, hey, I need to do something else besides practicing law. And I literally had no idea what that would be. But I knew I needed the stillness. And so I didn't work for almost 2 years. I
Mm-hmm.
sold the house, and thankfully I was a saver. So I had
Mm-hmm.
the luxury really to do
Mm-hmm.
that. I would
Mm-hmm.
not recommend wiping the coffee table clean for most people, but that's what I needed. I
Mm-hmm.
needed that. I
Mm-hmm.
needed that
Mm-hmm.
self-exploration.
You know, it's
It
really
was,
hard for people to hear, and economically, sometimes they can't stop. But that doesn't mean that they can't pivot and they can't know inside what their next move is. But
right.
you're just staying true to what your story was. So you had 2 years of time, and in that time, how did
Yeah,
you
in
get
that
to
time,
firefighting?
I'm at a gym and I'm working out at an odd hour because I'm unemployed. And I notice there's a group of guys that are typically there when I'm there, and I'm thinking, oh, I wonder if they're unemployed too, right? And so we start chatting. And I said, what do you guys do? And maybe they worked in a restaurant. I mean, I had like no clue. Like, why are you here at 10 a.m.? Most people are at work. And they laughed and they go, well, we just got off shift. And I said, well, what do you do? And they said, well, we're firefighters. In fact, you know, we've been watching you, and you would make a great firefighter. Have you ever thought about being a firefighter? And I'm like, yeah, what do you do exactly? I have no idea. And like literally no idea what they did. I had no idea that really 80 to 90% of their work is medical help. And very, very, small amount is actually fighting fires. So I started this conversation, and I learned about it, and it really had the three things that I was looking for. It was a job that was going to be different every day. It had the ability to learn intellectually a whole bunch of new skills constantly. And it had the physicality that I really craved, that I really missed in practicing law. And it was such a soul job. I mean, you're just doing this loving, amazing work for the community. And I was like,
as you say that, you can see your compass talking. Yeah, I can see it. I can see the yes coming forward. Like, this is a yes, yes, yes. And it's so interesting that what also happened is you were recognizing what was in front of you. And sometimes things are right in front of us, and you were curious and you were open. And that's when I think our compass really can have a conversation with us, is when we start showing some curiosity. And you were being really curious, and you didn't have any expectation of what that was. You didn't have any kind of like, I have to be this. You were just learning about it and being curious and listening at the same time. You had already gotten this relationship inside where you had stopped doubting yourself. And so your compass could talk to you and go, I want to do that. I'd like to try that. That sounds really interesting. So you become a firefighter.
I did I turned 39 right after the academy, like a couple of weeks after the academy.
Wow. And you're listening to your compass, and as you're going through this, did you feel like at each step of the journey that your compass was saying, yes, this is a yes, next step, this is a yes?
I used to joke with myself that becoming a lawyer, which I thought was incredibly challenging, 3 years of law school, past the 3-day bar exam, was the hardest thing that I was really going to ever achieve in my life. I was wrong. The physical challenges, the sexism, both subtle and outright, were sometimes I kept thinking to myself, is it 1950 or is it 1998? Where am I? So the challenges were huge, but my inner compass kept telling me, this is work that is going to feed your soul. You are going to be able to serve in a way and use your talents in a way that you never were able to as a lawyer. And that kept me leaning in to all the challenges.
Right. And I love that you're explaining that it wasn't a challenge-free pivot. And that I know that even when our compass is saying yes, and we're really listening to our yes, it's still filled with challenges. It's still really hard. But the difference is that you have a sense that this is where you want to be and choose to be, and it fulfills you in some way, that it's feeding your soul, and you're like okay with it, and it's not taking you down and giving you negative consequences and signals of unhappiness and physical symptoms in your body that show up when we are deeply unhappy.
Yes. I mean, it felt very much in alignment. That's what I really felt. I felt in aligned for the first time.
Love that word. Love that word. That alignment is alignment with your yes and your no. That's your truth. That's your wisdom. That's your soul just saying nothing else matters. This is connected into a bigger purpose. So now you teach others about pivoting. And so what are the stages? Are there stages of pivot, would you say?
I think it's a little bit different from everybody, but I think it's very much like a boundary. You become first, I think, aware that you're unhappy or that you have this sense of uneasiness, this out of alignment, this you feel off. And sometimes it's very abstract and you're just really not sure what it is. And I think the practice of generating stillness in our life, however we do that, allows us to really tap into that inner knowing. Because we know, right? We know inside, but oftentimes we do an incredible job of covering that inner knowing up, ignoring it, numbing it, all those things that we do, instead of just being with it and saying, yes, this is true. This is my alignment.
So those are two of the things that are kind of part of the stages. And you work with people that are kind of ready to pivot or wanting to pivot or in the middle of a pivot. And what kind of tips do you think there are to offer people who are listening who may themselves be kind of wondering, okay, I think I'm in a pivot, or I need some tips to go through this pivot? What would be your tips for them?
I think about the three parts of hope. Shane Lopez wrote a great book about hope. He's a hope researcher, and he talks about having, first of all, a goal that really like sings to our soul, something that you're willing to go through all of those challenges, because life is going to be challenging, but it's worth it. In fact, it's so important to you that it would be worth it if you weren't successful ultimately. It's that big of a deal, right? So having that goal, having that target, and understanding that meeting the target is almost irrelevant. I mean, certainly we want to, but it's that journey towards that target, because we don't know. We may have something else pivot us off along that journey. And then I think it's really the sense of agency, that sense in ourselves that we get when we're still, where we have a belief that we can get from here to there, to that better place. And is that perfect? No. I mean, our self-confidence wavers, absolutely, we are human. But really coming back to, I can do this. I can figure this out. I can get help. I can take a break, whatever it is that I need. And then really the last piece is the pathways piece, recognizing that it's not a straight shot. You need to have lots of backup plans because life is going to throw you some curveballs. And what you thought was how it was going to work out isn't.
We're in a gigantic curveball right now.
We're in a curveball
with the coronavirus. I mean, here we are having this talk, and we are all in a giant curveball.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely changed at the very minimum everyone's schedule. No one is really doing their day the same. Most people, if you have a child, especially a school-age child, you've now added school teacher to your list of, job things, and that has completely changed your day, right? And so again,
and there may be people who are listening who have also suddenly lost their jobs and are in kind of a forced pivot of what will they do, what happens next. There's a lot of unknowns. I am really saying to people to just right now, we're thinking about one day at a time. It's all very new, and you can't really expect of yourself to have a plan or have a solution right now. That would be very unrealistic. It's, one day at a time right now, and things are going to change again in the future.
And with our challenges, whether it's coronavirus or whether it's, getting laid off from a job or seeing how you work change, there's always that kernel of, challenge provides you the kernel of opportunity. So there's always something in there that you can get really creative with and say, okay, so, I'm not going to argue with what is. This is here, this is happening, this is the reality that we're dealing with. Now, how can I creatively respond to that? How can I create something out of that that will allow me to pivot into something that feels really good to me?
And staying true to that as well. So I want to ask you, like now, when you work with people that are facing a pivot or want to pivot, do you work with people that are sometimes in a forced pivot or people that are only in like a chosen pivot? Like what do you work on with people?
All kinds.
Okay.
I think sometimes people don't even know when we start to work together that they are on the verge of a pivot. And, through the process of coaching, it's similar to therapy in that you're just uncovering layer by layer of onion. And there's a recognition of like, wow, where I'm at right now is not really serving me. It's not, my best self can't shine here. How can I change that? And it doesn't necessarily mean leaving a job, right? It can be really shifting our perspective about the job, about your boss, about anything, right? And so
And
that allows
sometimes
you that
it's about,
creativity.
sometimes it's also about speaking up a little bit more about what your truth is, about what you need, about how certain things land on you and what other ways there are to use your creativity and your soul in your work that could be maybe worked with. So how do people get in touch with you? Do you work online with people now? Do you see them in person? Like what happens?
Well, before the coronavirus, I did both. And now really and I'm hoping obviously to get back to face in person. But I've always done online. I have a client as far away as Germany. So that's the fantastic part about the internet. It allows us to connect and to be together and to work together no matter where you are.
I think you're offering something that is so helpful to people. And it's funny that to hear you say that like your guiding star inside was that you really wanted to help people. Because, as I've met you and, thought about why I wanted to share your work with people was because I just think that what you're offering is so helpful. And so that helpfulness really has come across. And I did also see, from a boundary perspective that working with a pivot has a tremendous amount to do with listening inside and listening to your compass and trusting your compass. And our compass never gives us a plan. It just gives us kind of a sense of a yes or a no. And it gives us a lot of symptoms if we're not listening. So it's sort of like that game that you play as a kid when you move towards something and everyone in the room says like, you're getting warmer, you're getting warmer. No, you're getting colder, you're getting colder. That's what your compass is like. It gives you signals of you're getting closer, you're getting closer. No, this isn't it. Move away, move away. And if we don't listen, we get physical symptoms in our body. But I also love the piece that you're bringing to our listeners today about how important stillness is to then figure out how to see a path, how to be aware of a path. And a path, there are many paths usually. There isn't just a singular path. And I love that in your story, you see these firefighters in the gym. That's fantastic. So thank you for joining us today, Shannon. This was such a gift for all of us right now, particularly.
Thank
Be
you,
well
Sarri.
and take care.
All right.